Obamacare, immigration, and the Trump administration's ties to Russia.
The confrontations have put Republicans on the defensive. Many GOP representatives have decided to avoid the angry meetings altogether. Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton did show up. Here's what happened.
As an angry constituent, you work for us. Stand there with him at home. Expect us to be calm, cool, and collective. Wow, what kind of insurance do you have?
Let's bring our political panel right now. In Atlanta, we have CNN senior political analyst Mark Preston. Here in Los Angeles, CNN political commentator and Trump supporter John Phillips, Democratic strategist Dave Jacobson, and Republican consultant John Thomas. Okay, let's start with the reaction from the White House to these angry town hall meetings. Here's spokesman Sean Spicer earlier today.
I think some people are clearly upset, but there is a bit of professional protester manufactured base in there. But there are people that are upset. But I also think that when you look at some of these districts and some of these things, it is not a representation of a member's district or an incident. It is a loud group, small group of people disrupting something in many cases for media attention. No offense. It's just, I think that necessarily, just because they're loud, doesn't necessarily mean that there are many.
John Phillips, first to you. Sean Spicer, he's probably right here. The people protesting most likely are not Republicans, most likely not Trump voters. But at this point, does that actually matter?
Well, he happens to be right. I mean, it's not very hard to get 200 angry people in a room. I don't know if you've ever been in an airport when a flight has been delayed, but they seem to manufacture themselves. But in these Republican districts, and some of the footage that we saw were in places like Utah, somewhere in North Carolina, these are Republican districts where the Republican can win 60-40, which is a total landslide. But if the Democrats have 40% registration in these districts, that's still a lot of people who hated Donald Trump before the election, didn't vote for him, and hate him today. And the comparisons to the Tea Party, which I've seen all day, I guess you could call these guys the Green Tea Party, is just totally wrong in my opinion as well, because what was unique about the Tea Party was not the numbers of people that it put in the streets or put at these town hall meetings. What was unique about the Tea Party was what political scientists call critical realignment, where you had these blue-collar white Democrats that used to vote Democratic in presidential elections and legislative elections for years and years and years, realign themselves with the Republican Party, and 2016 was the culmination of that. There is no evidence that you're seeing former Trump supporters in these meetings or former Republican voters in these meetings turning on them en masse. These are Democrats, and it's not surprising, and I think it's not that big of a deal.
Dave, to you, as a Democrat here, yes, these are Democrats, yes, these are most likely not Trump supporters, but will there come a time when there will be Trump supporters who are turning up at these town hall meetings who are angry with the president?
I think it's possible. If you look at the president's approval rating, it's been ticking down every single day since he's been in office. In fact, if you look at past presidents, it took Barack Obama almost 900 days to have the majority of Americans disapproving of the job performance. It took 1,200 days for George W. Bush. It took a mere 8 days for Donald Trump to have the majority of Americans disapproving of his job performance. And I think that really underscores the fact that some of the people who perhaps held their nose and voted for Donald Trump are starting to disapprove of his job performance.
We will talk about those poll numbers in a moment, but Mark Preston, to you and to John Phillips's point, what are the similarities here between these town hall protests, these angry meetings, and the Tea Party? Because those comparisons have been made for the last couple of days. Do you see them as having similarities here?
Well, probably the biggest similarity, though, John, now is the fact that the Tea Party was dismissed by the Democratic Party back in 2009. It was dismissed by the Obama White House. It is now being dismissed by, at least publicly now, by the Trump White House. I think what you're going to see happen is you're going to see Republicans come back from their recess. They're going to come back to Washington, D.C., and they're going to have a real coming to Jesus moment about how are they going to move forward on some of the things that they said they are going to do, and how are they going to work hand in hand with a Republican administration in the White House that often is off message from what they're trying to do. Specifically, when you talk about the repeal and replace of Obamacare, the timelines, from what we hear publicly from the White House is much different than what we hear from congressional Republicans who actually have to put the legislation into order before it actually gets to the White House for signature. And then what you're going to see a really big fight on is on the issue of infrastructure spending. We all know that our infrastructure needs to be fixed, John, across the nation. But the question is, how do you pay for it, specifically when we're carrying such a heavy debt load at this point? And I think that congressional Republicans, it's going to be a hard pill for them to swallow if Donald Trump just says, let's write a blank check and get some things done.
Yeah, and John Thomas, as a Republican strategist, for many of these congressmen who are confronting these angry constituents, be they Republicans or Democrats or neither, they are in a bit of a bind here. They don't have anything to defend, especially on the issue of health care. They have a lot of guidelines, they have a lot of aspirations, but they have no details. They have nothing to offer these people in these meetings, and that's a huge problem.
It is a problem, and the biggest problem is an average member of Congress, if they get one phone call a day from an angry constituent, stop the presses in the office. And so if you're getting hundreds of phone calls, angry mobs, it really tests the constitution of these members of Congress. Hopefully for their sake they're in a safe district, but what they need is a major win coming out of the White House to kind of give them something to fall back on.
And Dave, the question for Democrats right now, who's actually at these meetings from the Democratic Party? Who is signing these people up? Who's getting their email addresses, their phone numbers, to make sure that this is not just some kind of group therapy session of an outburst of anger that it mobilizes into some kind of political movement by 2018 for the midterms?
Well, I think that's the big question. Is I think largely these are organic mobilization efforts that are on the ground, district by district. There's not really a national movement or a national apparatus that's really capturing this information, getting these folks to sign up, participate in an email listserv. And I think that's the big challenge that the next DNC chair is going to have to really tackle, is how do I tap into these protests, the Women's March, the protests at the airports, at these congressional offices and the town halls? How do I channel that energy to the upcoming election?
And John Phillips, just to bring you back into this, is there a concern, as a Republican, as a Donald Trump supporter, that what starts as essentially liberals and Democrats, will over time, if the president cannot deliver on his promises, become more widespread? And there will be similarities with the Tea Party in the sense that, they will go against the Republicans essentially to get their agenda through.
Well, it's only a danger if he alienates his supporters. This country is split 50-50 right now, where the people that supported Donald Trump want a completely different agenda being pushed in Washington, D.C. than these people. And we've seen this movie before. This is what happened with Occupy Wall Street. When Occupy Wall Street was organically popping up in all of these different cities, and the numbers were huge, and the protests were huge, and the media coverage was huge, we were told this is going to be a new America. They're going to demand that the Democratic Party move to the left. They're going to vote the Republicans out of office. And what's happened since then? The Republicans have won the Senate, the House, the presidency, a record number of state legislatures. They control a majority of the governorships in this country. It didn't translate into votes. I've seen absolutely no evidence of what we're seeing play out on television is going to translate into any electoral victory. And guess what? The Democrats have a huge road game coming up in the midterm elections. They're going to be defending 10 different U.S. Senate seats in states that Donald Trump won, and in many cases won handily.
And Mark Preston, though, John makes a good point there. There is a big road ahead for the Democrats, but the Republicans are not being helped by Donald Trump's poll numbers, at least not right now. Look at the numbers coming from Quinnipiac. According to Quinnipiac, Donald Trump's numbers are sinking like a rock, down to a record low when it comes to approval.
They are. So, I mean, let's give him a little bit of time, because these poll numbers are not going to have any real problematic effect on the Republican Party at this moment in time. But let's look down the road a little bit. We've seen Donald Trump get a lot of things done that he said he wanted to get done, or at least started to get done. And he's done that through executive order. That's basically, without any consultation from Congress. It is without any consultation from Congress, and he's able to get things done. However, at some point, you're going to hit the end of the road of being able to use an executive order to try to get things done. You are then going to have to work with Capitol Hill in order to get things done. And what John Phillips says is right, that Donald Trump runs the risk of alienating his supporters, because many of the people who voted for Donald Trump do not have the same agenda as congressional Republicans, or if they do, they don't have the same roadmap about how to get there. Legislating is very difficult. I know it's easy, for us to sit here behind these desks and to criticize people for not getting things done. but it is very hard and it is very expensive, and we're specifically seeing that right now with Republicans when it comes to the issue of Obamacare. You can't just say you want to get it done and it's going to get done. You have to put a lot of time, a lot of effort into it, and you have to have a plan.
Okay, a few hours ago we heard from the